from scratch. Yes, they do, in the very early days. And then they build, and they build again, and they build again. They don't knock the house down and start over. And so you learn a lot you learn a lot by studying their older technologies. But anyway, all the traces came up to top metal, and you can turn them on, and it's pretty wild. Let me zoom out. So as you can see. So I really wonder, I hear these guys all the time that they say, oh, Video Cipher 2 Plus can't be hacked, and Nagar 3 can't be hacked, and DirecTV can't be hacked, and blah, blah, blah. And anything can be hacked with enough effort and someone that's motivated and focused. And I'm not saying that DirecTV or Nagar or anybody's going to be hacked, but they could be in theory. They're not as strong as you'd think they are. So we go back to this General Instruments chip. Anybody familiar with the GI Video Cipher system? So it got cracked back in, I guess, the early 80s. And then they came out with the 2 Plus. Never got cracked, at least not that I'm aware of. And I don't know why. I really don't. The chip might have been custom, but it was some type of a TI MSP4, like a TMS 370 type chip. And so you look at it, and you've got some non-volatile memory here. You've got some static RAM. You've got more static RAM. And then here's the core, and look what we see here. What's this? Who can say what this is? I discussed this before. Micro or PLA, one of the two. So instruction registers are somewhere in this area, and they're right here. So there's your 8 registers. Freeze the latch, dump the whole chip. And then there's I think there's probably some other challenges. There may be an ASIC in here too. I don't know. But the chip's geometry was humongous. And the guys were cocky too. They put a little rocket ship on it. So it says Team Bonsai. It's funny, some of the things you see, ST puts frogs on all their chips, and these guys put, Team Bonsai. So, and if we zoom in a little closer, I just wanted to show you the Bonsai logo a little bit closer. But what's ironic here is I can tell that this is made by TI. This looks exactly like the older TI chips. You can tell the footprint, the way the process is laid, who makes the chip. Like I can spot TSMC any day, any time on like the 250 nanometer process and the 350 nanometer process. And it's interesting because once I study their flash on one, it's the same on the others that use that same type of flash. Maybe it's 16 bits though instead of 8 bits. It just depends. So here's a 200 power resolution image of the instruction registers. So you have 8 flip-flops sitting right here. You have one here, and there's an output here if you can see it on the screen. Here's another one. Now can anybody tell me what they see in this image? There's something weird about this image. Anybody see what's special about this? There's metal. There's a top layer of metal put over this area. So this was done on purpose. These guys knew that this was a weakness in the chip. And so they covered this on purpose. So you can't get to it without digging a hole through it first. So these were very early methods of protecting what they deemed a valuable area of the chip, sacred area. And here you can see one of these is like set and reset for the flip flop. And so you just check them, and the one that's holding the opcode when it's low, stable, is the one that you want to freeze. And so there's your 8 bits. There's 2 more, and there's 2 more. If you sat on the data bus right here, you'd see the opcode that they're executing for the entire cycle of the amount of cycles that instruction took. Does anybody have questions so far? Am I going too fast or not explaining clear enough, or should I speed up? We got a lot more stuff. This is old stuff. Okay, so saw a cool chip from Fujitsu. Anybody here use Fujitsu chips? No? So it looked like a mess. They did some weird stuff, but look again, microcode right here, or PLA, whichever it is. And here's the bus lines. But what threw me off when I looked at this the first time was the bus lines nothing came in from the bottom of the chip right here. And then the only place I saw the data bus come in was way out of, it's not in this image, it's way out of view on the left. The 8 bits came in. But then I looked at it a little closer, and I only had one of these chips to look at, so I couldn't strip it down. But what I could do is image it high res now and then rebond it and power it up and work with it. And so I imaged it high res and then studied it. And what I was able to study was that this was basically laid as rows, 8 rows across the chip in the area of the core. And so in these rows, each row was a bit weight, D0, D1, D2, D3, D4, and so forth. And what actually happened was the bus line came in, went down to the bottom layer of metal, and came entirely across the chip and popped out here, and then popped out here, and popped out here. So all 8 bits popped out here, and meanwhile they interconnected at various points, what I'll call columns, for say data pointer register, program counter, register 1, register 2, whatever the architecture is. But the most important thing of the chip that makes this thing tick is they come up here, they trickle through, and then they plugged into 8 flip-flops up here. And then they had a nice line here that followed through the inverter that basically was always driven low. So hold it low, set on the bus, eavesdrop the bus, and you walk the bus with 1 needle. So with 2 needles, you dump this chip, and you've dumped every other chip that I've spoke about so far today. Microtech is this Chinese smart card company. Microtech used the same exact flash that from TSMC, except TSMC said, oh, now we have filler metal on the surface, so it's more secure. Something like this they're going to probably be peddling. But I've already studied the flash on the older Freescale parts that you can buy, the 908 series of Freescale. And so you can see here the ordering of the flash. The chances that the user that designed into this TSMC process modified these lines is almost 0% possibly. So here's that die, and here I've marked exactly what to do. So I've said, okay, it's 25 to 27 spaces over from M3. I don't know really what I mean there, actually, but, I think I don't know. Anyway, so, and then right in this box is where I want to dig, and what's under there is data bus bit 0. And so I made an assumption here, because when I had stripped it down, this is a stripped down chip, but I didn't polish it. So if I had polished it with a lapping machine, I could get rid of all the oxide here and make this look smooth as can be. Just some notes on the chip. There's that filler again. It's everywhere. Here's some dark images of it. I'm just looking for the bright image. So here's a delayered chip, and we've got a huge flash here, 128 kilobytes. We've got 2 huge static RAMs. We've got 2 small static RAMs. This should be the 256 internal bytes. And then we have a boot ROM. So there's a ROM right here. Well, guess what? I'll bet you money that they boot from this ROM, and then they check the flash for like FFs or something. And if they see FF, then they stay on the ROM and they let you download or upload to it. Read or write to the flash. Very poor instantiation of a security measure. This is supposed to be a smart card. Remember. So here's the ATR coming out of the chip from what this went to. And so ATR is coming out of the chip, and I'm just sitting there with a needle down on D0, and I'm taking the other end I'm not even using a buffer, and I'm taking the needle, the end of a coax line, and I'm shorting it on ground. And so it just literally like this as it's resetting. And lo and behold, all of a sudden on reset 3B, the ATR changed. Well, guess what? That was the bootloader ATR. And so I glitched it back into the bootloader using a simple, my hand with a probe in my hand. It's crazy, but this is a secure smart card from a Chinese manufacturer. So, sorry? It is ASCII. This is actually a Dreambox clone chip for the Dreambox free-to-air receivers. So this was some Dreambox smart card chip that the Chinese had put in for the clone of the real Dreambox receiver. And so just actually, I did this in about 5 minutes after I was playing. Once I exposed D0 in 5 minutes or so, I got it, and I couldn't believe it. I was laughing because I was in the middle of another job, and this was just like I was just playing around. You could see here like the older smart card chip. I'm going to speed up, guys, because I've got like 8 minutes, and so I'm going to actually skip a couple things. Before we spoke about dark field, here's the corner of that boot ROM in that 8051 from 1983. That's dark field. Here's bright field on the same microscope. So just flick a switch and it switches the mode. So bright field, you can't really read the ROM. You can't really see the bits. Switch to dark field, boom, now you can see them clear as day. Things have a purpose sometimes. I built up a lot of junk and I always find a use for it. So because the optical microscope today is not that good. I use a fib today like crazy. And so like the 66 PE, I'll polish them down using a lapping machine. So I'll strip off a layer. I get all that oxide residue left. The metal floated away, it's gone. And I make these images on the fib after I polished it. So I polish them down until the actual metal is exposed to the air, to the atmosphere. Now, if this was copper, which it would be if you're at 45 nanometers or below 130 below, you're going to be copper. This would oxidize within time, unless it's in like a vacuum chamber, which it wouldn't be permanently. So here's the actual core to the 66 PE that I was after to study. Now, what's interesting on the fib, if this had been in a SEM, these lines would all have been white. They would have been white. But the fib's giving me voltage contrast. So this is telling me that these lines have been disconnected and they came from the surface. They came from up above on the upper metal layer. And so I polished this thing so smooth that you can still see, these are the vias where they made a connection before. So does anybody do this kind of stuff, like polishing chips? I know you do, Karsten, but does anybody else? No? This is a process that it's pretty fun, but you take a bunch of chips, you strip them all to the same level, and then you practice. You could build your own polisher too if you really tried. The liquid is really what you need to get, which is about $100 for a gallon of it. Here, if they had made microcode changes to the 66 PE, I would have seen it in this table. This is one of the instruction tables. The 66 PE, as I've discussed when I did the TPM attack, runs on microcode. And so it's kind of their doom. Now the bus scrambling I spoke about earlier, nobody's doing that anymore. They're doing it maybe outside the core, but in the actual central nervous system of the chip, the CPU is almost never scrambled, and I don't know why. Here's the metal 2 layer of that same area. So now in Photoshop, I can stack these images, and I'm running out of time, so I'm going to try to find that fast. I'll find that last. So another cool thing in the fib, you get a chip like an ST with a mesh. I can drill down a hole. This is all tungsten residue right here, or platinum residue. I have both metals in my fib. So I drilled 8 holes and touched the bus line. The bus line is running exactly north and south on this picture. So from the top to the bottom, it's running down the chip. So I found isolated where the bus line was with a reference right here, but it's out of view kind of. But right in here, that's a hole that I dug to see where are the lines down on metal 3. I use a chemical called xenon difluoride in the fib to do this without hurting the metal. So drilled 8 vias down, touched metal 1, and then filled the via to the surface with platinum, and then made little donut rings in platinum as well. And so then I had to isolate them because these would have been shorted out. So then I used that same xenon difluoride gas, and I very carefully milled boxes around them. And it's black because it's an insulator again. The tungsten's been removed, and this is the oxide. Where here, this is like a spray can when I'm using the tungsten deposition. There's overspray always. So that was called a cleanup. Here's some random chip that didn't have good grounding. Atmel Mega 8. Anybody use a Mega 8? Nobody? Okay. The poly, not a very good. I need to practice when I'm polishing the poly. ST Thompson 350 nanometer process. It's used for like Nagravision, people around the world, GSM SIM cards. Not secure, but people have to focus to break it. This is again polished, not perfect, but good enough for what I was after. So you can see like an overall mosaic I was starting to make of the chip. So these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across. So this would have been 5 across by so many down, just to give me an overall mosaic in the fib. It's kind of I just did it because I could, but I didn't actually stitch them yet. Just no time. And so I was going to discuss this stuff, but there's not enough time to really cover it. The ST mesh, even today, I just did this last week with Karsten Knoll, make a nail polish mask, boom. It's in the Wired video, you can see it. The mesh is gone.